Hey guys, I just want to welcome you to this series of videos that we're going to be starting to release, and these were based off a dinner groups conference that we had recently being June or January of 2019, and so I'm not sure when you're watching this, but hello, welcome. But we want to start providing more videos so that you guys can learn at your own pace, and I know some of you are such geeks that you love to watch this content again, and so that's also me, so that's part of that too. But why don't I tell you a little bit more about myself? My name is Nick. I am the dinner groups director here at Hoboken Grace. This is my lovely family. My son Marcus, my wife Erica. We've been married for 8 years. Marcus is now 14 months. This was from baby dedication, but he is wonderful and such a blessing in our life. I moved to Hoboken 11 years ago, and I moved here to work for JP Morgan. I had studied finance at Temple University in Philadelphia, and naturally everyone who studies finance wants to move into investment banking. And so at the age of 22, I moved to Hoboken. I moved here because my best friend from high school lived here, and I thought this would be a good place to sublet and figure out which is the community for me, and ended up falling in love with it and staying here. And I personally love how walkable this city is. I don't know if you can see, I know the camera adds a lot of weight, but I need a walkable city or else I'd weigh 500 pounds. Let me take you back to 2008. So I just started working, and obviously I told you it was investment banking, and if you know anything about investment banking in 2008, they didn't go together very well. It was a very tumultuous time, and I was working very long hours. Not that you don't do that anyways in investment banking, but I remember in March of 2008 watching the employees from Bear Stearns, which was another investment bank that had collapsed. Our company, JP Morgan, had bought them, and I remember them walking into the line and coming into work that day and just being grateful to God that I was on this side of it and was protective, and how fortunate I was. I could easily have been hired at Bear Stearns and so forth. And dealing with all of these changes that were going on, getting to the end of 6 months of working and realizing, oh crap, I'm in this forever now. There's not another semester where I get new classes and new opportunities, and just not knowing what's going on in life, and figuring out there should be more to this. And I was just not a healthy person, and I wanted to figure out ways to do that. And so naturally I was thinking, all right, how do you become a good person? Oh, good people go to church. So I started going to church, and I had grown up in the church, and so that naturally led to that decision. And my parents had always been encouraging me to be a good person, and so I thought, oh, you be a good person. That's what'll make you feel better. That's what'll happen. So naturally, I'm looking for churches around the area. I find a place called Church at Hoboken. That's what our name was before we became Hoboken Grace. I attend for the first time. I enjoy it a little bit. I first started attending in March, and I came, and I was just really a guy who was just there to sit in a row, listen to a sermon, and then I sort of took off. And I was off and on for a while, and then I started pursuing my wife in a relationship, and we started dating for a couple months, and then all of a sudden she decided, yeah, he's not necessarily mature enough, I'm out. And so my foundation was just or not my foundation, but my world had just collapsed because of that, because man, I was so in love with her, and I knew that she was the one I wanted to pursue. And so, but deep in my heart, I knew she was right, that I just wasn't the person I needed to be. And so part of that drove me back to church, and part of it was that my upbringing, I knew that if my relationship with God was right, I wouldn't feel this way. And so that was some of the motivating things that helped me draw into that. And so or draw me back to that. And so when I went back to church the next time, a bunch of the guys that were there invited me to be a part of what was called their dinner group. And I joined that group. And the first thing I noticed when I got in it was they were a bunch of older guys. They were 27, 28. Here I am at now 23. And so these guys seem so much more mature than I am. But one of the things that really stood out to me that made them mature was that they loved and pursued their wives with such integrity and character, and I wanted that. Like it wasn't that I wanted part of it was I wanted the relationships they have, but the way in which they loved others was just so impactful into my life, and they were good people. And so I was like, you know what, I need to make a commitment to be a part of this. And so I started to hang out with them more. I started to make sure dinner group was a priority in my life. And what I was able to come to find out was what made them good wasn't that they were good people hanging around other good people. It was that their God, Jesus, was good and allowed them to, I'm not saying that right, but let me say that God had loved them so well that they were able to love others well. And so they were just benefiting from his goodness that allowed them to be good, that allowed them to love well. And so that just continued to change everything in my life. And I was able to take next steps, and I was able to grow in my relationship with them. If you go back to the dinner group slide, that'd be awesome. Then in April of 2009, Pastor Chris asked me to come on board and pursue becoming the person who would direct all of our groups, who would organize them, who would encourage leaders. And so that's been my role for it'll be 10 years in April of 2019. I've loved it. I've learned so much about what we do here in our community in Hoboken. It's fantastic. I can't wait to have you start that. And one of the reasons that we started groups is that we wanted a place where people could live out their faith. So James 1:22 talks about not just being hearers of God's word, but becoming doers. And so we didn't just want another study where we just keep learning and learning and learning and learning, but we wanted a place where we would become strong, where we could take steps of faith, where we could put these things into action. And so that's where dinner groups were born out of. I think one of the things that makes dinner groups so impactful is that people come from all over the country to come here and live in Hoboken. And so dinner groups are a place where people can belong, where they can find family. And so that's another big element of groups. And so we're going to dive into that here in a little bit, called Group Basics.